Welcome to another episode of You Don't Know Wednesday. On our last episode, I told you about the dream that I had had summer of 2001. I gave you the full details about that dream, and if you have missed that episode, then I'm going to encourage you to go back real quickly and take a look. Now, I left you off where I said the next morning after the dream, I had the honor of knowing that the conference president of the Southwest Region Conference was on campus. Now, for those of you that don't understand that terminology, basically he was a big-time pastor. He was the head pastor of the conference of churches that I attended in the Southwest Region Conference. So I expected this brother to truly lead and guide me in the right direction. Because at 18, I didn't know what the dream meant. And I was willing to seek guidance and not just assume that I knew what it meant. And I went to the cafeteria in search of this brother, and lo and behold, I found him. And when I got to the cafeteria and located him, I pulled him to the side and I said, "Pastor so-and-so." I introduced myself. He knew my family. And I told him about my dream in full detail. I didn't leave nothing out. Again, if you missed the dream, go back to the last episode where you'll find me expressing what took place in the dream. And when I got done sharing with him the dream, I looked at him and I said, "Pastor," with big wide eyes, "can you tell me what the dream means?" I was confident that this brother was going to tell me something that was going to lead and guide my path, and that was going to set me on the right path, right? He paused and without hesitation looked at me and said, "I don't know." And he turned around and walked off. Oh my goodness, I was so cross with this brother. I was angry with him. Because here I am at 18, I'm thinking, you this big time pastor. You know what I'm saying? And see, I was young, I was immature at that time. Titles don't mean nothing. You hear me? Titles, I don't have a title today. I'm not a pastor. I don't get paid for this. I'm just a humble sinner saved by grace and clothed in Christ's righteousness. Titles don't mean jack. And that's not to say that he didn't tell me exactly what the Lord wanted me to hear. In fact, it took years for me to really be grateful to this man, because he could have very well spoke something into existence that God didn't want me to do, just to look wise, just to look like he was educated. So he really did me a favor that day. But at that time, I couldn't understand that. I thought that, well, if you are a preacher, and then not only a preacher, but you the main preacher in my church, you're the head preacher. Man, I know you got interpretation on interpretation. You got interpretation for days, is what I was thinking. But he spoke the truth and he said, "I don't know." And he didn't linger around to fabricate anything. He abruptly turned around and went about his business. And I appreciate him to this day for it. Because had he told me the wrong thing and I had followed the wrong set of advice, I might be dead in the grave. And so, having understood his lack of interpretation, if you will, at that time, I walked away disgruntled. But the summer wasn't quite over yet. I had to make a decision as to where I was going to go to school. And there were there was one school in particular that it almost seemed like I was destined to go to. And here's the reason why. City Temple Seventh-day Adventist Church, the year was 2001, the same year. And it was a bit earlier in that year, so it was right before the summer. I had been called upon to preach a sermon. It was a youth day at the church. And this is a big church, a healthy audience, if you will. And I was called upon to preach a sermon, and I'll never forget the name of the sermon. I was 18. At the Buzzer was the name of the sermon. And I remember preaching that sermon, and when I was done, Reggie Dupard. Now, he had a football career with the New England Patriots. He was a running back for them. I think it was sometime in the early 90s. Now, he wasn't Emmitt Smith or Barry Sanders, so you may not hear that name and recognize it. But he did play in the NFL for a few years. He's a Seventh-day Adventist like I am. And he attended at that time, he and his wife, the City Temple Seventh-day Adventist Church. They had done a lot of work with Three Angels Broadcasting Network, which is a Christian broadcasting network that's affiliated with my denomination. Again, that's Seventh-day Adventism. And they had done youth programs, recorded youth programs on their the Three Angels Broadcasting Network. And so they were connected with the youth, and I think that they really wanted to see young people make it in life. They wanted to see young people do the right things and follow the right path. So he walks up to me after the sermon at the buzzer, and he says to me, "Young man, you're going to be a preacher one day." Now, this is before the dream, and he didn't know that that was always my desire anyway. But this was before the dream. He said, "You know what? Oakwood Seventh-day Adventist University in Huntsville, Alabama, which just so happens is where I live right now." And there's a whole story about that. That's further on down the road, because at this time I was living in Texas. But he says there's a college, Oakwood Adventist University, which I was familiar with. He says, "I'm going to help pay for you to go there." Those were his exact words. Now, brother, I ain't rich at this point. Brothers and sisters, I wasn't rich. And scholarships most likely I wouldn't have gotten, because I wasn't all that book smart. I didn't apply myself to my schoolwork. And remember, I had gotten my GED. So I looked at him, and with delight, I said, "Okay, I guess I'm going to go to Oakwood." But you know, there's something about my spirit, and I don't take no credit for it. I can hear something and I can feel like it's right, but I will always go to God and say, "Lord, show me what your will is," because I know what I want to do, and this may seem like the right path to take, but honestly, I don't really know if this is what you want me to do. So lead and guide me. I went back home to Tyler, Texas, where City Temple is. It's in Dallas, Texas, about a 2-hour drive distance. And I went back to Tyler, Smith County, Texas. And I got to praying on that thing. I said, "Lord, I don't know where you want me to go. Because now, as I have had this dream, summer camp is coming to an end, and I've got to be thinking about the future." So right as I've had this dream, and I've shared it with this pastor, and I'm disappointed as to the interpretation, I'm asking the Lord, where am I supposed to go? What do you want me to do with my life? In fact, the young lady that I was dating, that I had finally secured her affection and attention, we had decided to date. And, I had said to her that I really like you. And I really did. However, in the back of my mind, I knew we were about to separate, because, again, she was moving from Texas to Maryland, and then we were both about to go off to school. Now, something in me thought we may end up at the same school. And sure enough, she went to Oakwood College, where I had been contemplating going to myself. But I prayed. I said, "Lord," after summer camp left, I left with a girlfriend. We kept in touch over the phone. I remember City Temple, the church in Dallas where I had preached earlier that year. I was a part of a choir, which this young lady was also a part of, the Total Praise Youth Choir, and we did some recordings. You may remember back in the early 2000s, Kirk Franklin had a group called One Nation or One NC or something like that. They didn't last very long. It was a couple of brothers and sisters, and then there was a white girl in the group. Well, one of the guys from the One Nation crew that Kirk Franklin had managed came and produced some songs with us. We recorded an album, and I remember this was after the summer camp, and we were about to go off to school or wherever prospective things that we were about to do, but we took the time to record this album, and that album is out right now today. It was a great production. Well, anyway, I remember me with the young lady there. We were hugged up on each other, showing our affection for each other. Totally different from the way it went during the summer. But by this time, she had fallen for me, and she was making plans. In fact, she was talking about us making out. She was talking about us doing this, that, and the third, things that I hadn't ever really done. I mean, I had played around, and you know some of the stories if you've been watching these episodes religiously or faithfully, then you'll know that I did get into some things early on. But, you know, she was talking in a manner that shocked me because, hey, here, this girl didn't want nothing to do with me. Now she's talking about us doing some things, okay? And I guess that's just the way it went. And but my mind is considering the future and where am I going to end up? And realistically, this relationship's not going to work because you're moving to Maryland and then we might not even end up in the same college. So why are we putting all of this effort into this relationship? I began to start thinking about these type of things. Well, after this recording, I ended up back in Tyler. I had about a month or two before, actually not even a month, about 2 or 3 weeks before the semester would begin, and I had to make a decision as to where I was going to go. And with that, come back to our next episode next week for more.